Yo, what's up, YouTube? It's your boy Ninja, and like I said, I was gonna get to these quickly. Well, as soon as I could, because I wanted to go ahead and get the ideas off my head. And you might be looking at this Crollo picture like, "Oh, that's lazy." It is. I mean, well, some of you won't say that. I'm not talking about the artwork. I'm talking about because I didn't make a thumbnail for this series yet, just in case. But I already made one for the Asta series. Listen. I made that one while I was making the pictures for the poll yesterday, not yesterday, 2 days ago. So yeah, my fault, I guess. I just forgot. And it's not really all that like it's not like I'm choosing a favorite series, because if we really look at it, I've been making MHA series since the beginning of my channel. I'm pretty sure my first channel videos was about Deku. It was a Kilo of Deku, which I still have to redo because I have I have never made that series work. The first time I made it, I did finish it, but it was kind of yeah. And then when I remade it, thinking I've had some experience with I almost say Kirito, with Killua Naruto, which also I dropped that one too. It wasn't bad. It just like towards the tuning exam art where this nigga summoned 3 dragon women and shit. I just went off the rocker. I yeah, so that one but as for the remake of the Killer Deku one, I don't know why I'm rambling about this. But yeah, about that remake, the when I did remake it, it was just rushed, like extremely rushed. However, however, when I do remake it, when I have free time, so whichever one of these two series is I make, I'm then gonna make the other one. Then by that point, I will be prepared to remake Kilo Deku. I will have a whole script for it and everything. Because normally I go, well, usually like back in the older days, up until recently, until the Gilgamesh Naruto videos, I was recording these without a script back then. But now, now I'm starting to script my videos. Well, my vocals, and then well, since my vocals are scripted and I'm turning them into texting stories, then technically my videos are now scripted, which isn't a bad thing. I'm not saying it is a bad thing. I I'm just saying that I used to freestyle my videos, but now while I am freestyling them, I'm just getting rid of most of the and what was I finna say? Yeah, yeah, that's kind of annoying to forget where I was and whatnot. And yeah, I should probably start the video. Y'all ain't come for this. My fault. Anyways, I'm 3 minutes in and I've been rambling. I'm gonna just put it in the description and whatchamacallem and the comments that the video starts at what 4 minutes. We'll just say 4 minutes. I'll wait. Take a sip of water while I'm waiting. Okay. Now we be before that. My fault. I wanted to make this story originally a vigilante story, like because well, it would have followed the how Crollo is technically not a hero or a villain, but like technically they're villains. They're more like I can't call them anti-heroes. They're just the Phantom Troop, right? So at first I was gonna go that route until I made this. Well, all for one son, neglected, yada yada, this and that, right? So yeah, all of that was before I did that. So no, this will not be a vigilante story. However, this will be a true hero story. The true part of this is very important. You'll see why later. So now I gotta write in the comments. I start at 5 minutes. Now, let's actually begin this story before I start rambling again and fucking forget. Growing up, Izuku would be neglected by his father. His father detested him because he was quirkless. Well, that's what Midoriya believed. His father didn't like him because he was quirkless. His father just wanted to control him, and since, well, he was quirkless, he wasn't useful to his father. This caused Midoriya to grow a early hatred for his father. Obviously, I just said that. My fault. I had to break that. I'm sorry. I do not know why I just. Anyways, my fault. It just feels so good to be recording videos again. Anyways, back on topic. His hatred for his father would then spill over to hatred for villains in general. He would see how his father interacted with heroes, or, well, fought with heroes occasionally just to steal their quirks and kill them sometimes. Sometimes he just let them suffer without their quirks. But then he saw how he interacted with the villains. You see, sometimes he still killed the villains, sometimes he stole their quirks if he thought they were useful or interesting, or if the villains tried to pull one over on him. However, there was another side to this villain tree that he just didn't like, and it was the fact that all of the villains were just evil for no reason. You see, one of the villains he met was bragging about how he killed a woman, but first he did things to her. He raped her and left the woman scarred for a month before he returned. And she had called the heroes, but they didn't make it in time as he raped her again before he killed her. And this man was just so proud of this. He was laughing at a table full of other villains in this bar that his father owned. And all of these guys just were laughing about their sick and twisted crimes and how heroes are just so slow and this and that. This would cause Izuku to hate villains deeply. But it all would just somehow return back to his hatred for his father. And when his father decided to form this villain group, when Midoriya turned about the age of 5 to 6, he would see a kid that was not much older than him, maybe 7. And Midoriya is 5, the kid is 7. Yeah. And seeing this boy who was a bit older than him cling to his father as if that were his father made Midoriya feel weird, considering whenever he used to try and get close to his father like that, his father would push him away. All for One was not a good parent, and yet here he is treating this kid as if they were his legitimate child. And when Midoriya was growing older, 2 years would pass, and Midoriya is now 7. The kid is 9, and the two of them aren't close. Midoriya did not want to get close to this guy because he wanted to be a villain. Midoriya doesn't know his backstory much, but he did hear or overhear his father talking to a doctor one day saying how he took Tenko's quirk and turned it into something else. Well, didn't turn it. he just gave him the decay quirk. But yeah, Midoriya, not Midoriya. His name is Izu. He doesn't have a last name, but I'm so used to calling him Midoriya that it's slipping out. My fault. Izuku would have been listening to this conversation with such disgust. And when he tried to tell Tenko attacked him. And Midoriya, I mean, he's a kid and he hasn't learned to fight, would get beat up. And Tenko almost used his quirk on Midoriya because Midoriya tried to quote unquote lie on All for One, his father figure, the only man who has accepted him. And All for One, seeing how Midoriya, how Izuku was just so weak, he started to favor him even less than he did before. Because at first, he would at least protect Midori. He would at least protect Izuku from any villains or whatnot that would try him. But he would nowadays just let Midoriya do whatever. Sure, he still has a tracker inside of Midoriya's body, a tracking quirk. He doesn't really care what happens to him. He one time literally left Midoriya by a dumpster. If I say Midoriya, just let it slide at this point. It's gonna happen. Likely a lot. I'm sorry. Ow, I just cracked my leg. Anyways, Midoriya would be left in this alleyway, like I said before, and when he left him there, he told him to find his way back home. Now, Midoriya thought about running away, but Izuku thought about running away, but he knew that his father could still find him, and he didn't want to risk that. So Izuku would run through this alleyway, then eventually would make it onto the streets, and he would see people. But these were gangsters, and they were going through a drug trade, it looked like. But there were cages, and those cages had whimpers and cries coming from them. As Midoriya's eyes would widen in horror as he saw these people in these cages crying and begging to be freed, as they were being sold. And as the people who saw Midoriya looked at him, they assumed that he was one of the kids who had somehow gotten out of the cage, and they ran to grab him. Midoriya immediately bolted back into the alleyway, terrified. And these people would start to use their quirks to try and catch up to Midoriya, who has no conditioning training by this point. However, he was able to fit through a small crevice or a small crack in the wall, and he would slip into the forest. He would start to run and run and run until his legs could not hold him anymore, and he would fall into almost at a stream. He would fall into a river, and this river would start to pull him along. The waves were just too tough for his young body to swim out of, plus, he was never taught how to swim. And right as he was passing out unconscious, about to drown, All for One would pull him out of the water and would laugh at him, asking did he enjoy his time playing with his friends. This is when the villains who were chasing Midoriya would have caught up to him, and when they saw All for One holding Midoriya, they would tell their boss, they would say that let's try that again. They would thank their boss for catching one of the children who had escaped, but that's when All for One would raise his hand at them and would activate one of his quirks. This quirk would immediately cause their heads to explode, and Midoriya would be placed in front of him as their blood splattered all over him. Now, this feeling of this warm blood all over his face and arms and body in general was weird because of the coldness he felt from being in the water. And he would tremble in fear at what his father could do to him. And his father would tell him the next time he tries to interfere with one of his plans, aka with Tenko, that he would kill Izuku himself. And the next time it happens, he'll make sure to do it in a manner that makes sure Midoriya, or well, Izuku suffers. He would ask him, does he understand? And obviously, Izuku, now terrified, would say yes. And from this point on, a few more years would pass, as Midoriya is now 9 years old and Tenko is now 11. Now, by this point, Tenko has started to kill people because, well, he is now the leader of the League of Villains. Almost forgot what it was called. My fault. And because he was the leader of the League of Villains, he would, well, obviously be looking for recruits. However, he already has a recruit that was placed there by his father, this being Kurogiri. However, he wanted to find some misfits of his own and took up the mantle of being called Shigaraki, Tomura Shigaraki. Now, this is when Midoriya, who has been training ever since that situation, would finally be ready to enact his plan. He's been waiting all his life, ever since that day, for this chance to come. And so, while Shigaraki and the others were out looking for new members to join the League of Villains, and it was just him and his father alone in, well, the base, Midoriya would step up to his father. And while this might seem dumb to anyone who had just heard the threat that their father had told them, Midoriya at this point did not really care because he had a plan. And regardless of if he lived or died, he wanted to get rid of his father for good. And so he would step forward out of his room, something he never had done since that day. And his father would actually be surprised that he had the guts to step up to him like this. But Midoriya would take it a step further. He would jump up and would land on his desk. His father would look up at him from his seating position as Midoriya stared down at his dad. And this is when his father would ask him, why is he being so bold? And Midoriya and Izuku would then reply, because you might have threatened to kill me on several occasions now. His tone was different. It wasn't the scared child or the scared kid that he used to be. His voice was calm, too calm. And he had this look in his eye, as if he didn't really care anymore. And so his father decided to hear him out. He would say, fine, tell me what you need. Oh, I need nothing from you. After all, you're weak. All for One would stop writing as he would put down his pen and would stand up, meeting Izuku's eyes, even though Izuku is still a bit higher than him since he's standing on a desk, but they're about eye to eye level. Now, All for One would look at him confused, asking him to repeat what he said, and Izuku would say, I mean, you have to be weak. You claim to be the strongest villain, and yet you couldn't even beat All Might. Hell, you couldn't even beat Star and Stripes, for that matter. Think about it. If All Might trained Star and Stripes, and yet her ability is something you were never able to take, and you were never able to get One for All back from someone like All Might or any of the One for All users, then you have to be weak. Correct? Now, Midoriya was betting on something to happen here, but it worked a little too well, as his father got angry and he swung his hand up at Midoriya's head, Izuku's head. Again, I'm sorry. I keep saying Midoriya, just ignore it. It's gonna take some time to get used to. Plus, in the texting story, it won't. I won't be saying Midoriya, so yeah, sorry. Now, like I said, his father would swing his arm at his head, and Izuku would just barely, and I do mean barely, dodge this hit, as the wall behind them, was destroyed, and Midoriya and Izuku, seeing his chance, would kick the deck, like he would jump down off the desk because he dodged the attack, and he would kick the desk at his father, who would catch it with one hand quite easily, and he would destroy it. However, he would see that Izuku was gone. And this is when he would realize that his this is when he would realize that his 9-year-old son had just successfully manipulated him. And in a weird way, he would be proud of this. He would start to chuckle as he would realize that Izuku was trying to run away from him. And his plan wasn't to confront him, but it was to make him angry enough to not care about him anymore. But that's not going to happen because Izuku is special to him. And this is when he would chase after Izuku. He would fly out and like at we all know that All for One is hella fast. So when he flew after Izuku and went to grab him, Izuku, hearing, like, obviously you can hear someone flying at you, especially in anime, makes a lot of noise. So Izuku, hearing this, would turn to see a hand coming for his neck. And before he could even react fast enough, his neck was grabbed, but it was grabbed a little too hard. As when his neck was grabbed by All for One's hand, he let go, but had wires wrapped around his neck as he came to a skidding stop. Basically, he flew past Midoriya, Izuku, as the wires wrapped around his neck, and when he came to a stop, said wires wrapped around his neck but were yanked because, well, he had basically, it did a lot more than what it should have, and Midoriya was now limp. And this is when All for One would snatch like the wires because, well, he doesn't know that Midoriya. I say Midoriya, then instantly get mad. I said it. My fault. He would get mad that this is exactly why I gotta start editing these vocals because Jesus, I'm gonna crash out. Anyways, like I was saying, All for One would snatch these wires, not knowing that Izuku was already limp. He wasn't dead yet. He was just dislocated. Yeah, he couldn't move. He was still conscious until his father snatched those wires and Midoriya was slammed through multiple trees and his body was forced to come through said tree. So yeah, he wasn't looking too good. As he was laid out by the edge of the forest, but All for One didn't notice this as he was too focused on his masterpiece now being destroyed. It was ruined. The perfect vessel to house One for All was now destroyed by his own hands. The reason why he kept Izuku in the house, the reason why he treated him so harshly, and the reason why he would bite his lip in anger, causing it to bleed a bit as he looked down at his son, who was still unresponsive. He would then grab Izuku and, while angry, he would drop him back to the ground. He would then start to remove something from his body that he had planted into Izuku at the age of 4. This would be a quirk restraining. Well, he used a quirk restraining quirk. Basically, it restrains quirks so that they don't, appear. And this was implanted on his son's heart. Him taking this quirk back because it was quite useful. He was doing it for a reason, actually. And that reason was he wanted to take Izuku's original quirk because it's similar to his own quirk. However, as he took this quirk from Izuku, his heart would begin to beat again as energy would start to flow through Izuku because of his quirk's awakening, which was halted originally. This shift in his body would cause his body to tense and then snap back as if it were fixing itself, as if this strange aura around him had just forced his body to, well, return to its natural state, and as if something inside of him had changed. But All for One wouldn't notice this. He was too angry that he had just destroyed his perfect vessel. The perfect vessel to house One for All with his own hands. And he would start to activate the repulsion quirk to destroy Izuku's body. I mean, sure, Izuku isn't known amongst the records, so it's not like if he is found, they'll know who he is. Plus, he's gonna destroy his body. They're not gonna find shit. But that's what he thought. As he prepared this repulsion beam, basically, it's condensed air that he was going to use to crush him or, flatten him. And then he was going to use an explosion added onto this quirk to completely destroy his flattened body. So, 2 quirks in one move. Now, Izuku's body now fixed, no longer contorted and, mangled, would cause his heart to beat faster as the adrenaline from the pain would set in as his eyes would snap open. Now, All for One would notice this as he would fire the attack, but in fear, Midoriya would cover his body with his arms, like putting both arms up to block this attack. However, he would have activated his quirk accidentally as this book would appear in front of him. Now, this book appearing in front of him would block the attack and it would absorb into the book. And then the book would close. And as this book closed, All for One would be confused. Wait, so this is your quirk? Good. You're alive. I don't have to kill you yet. And since your quirk is now active, you'll be useful. Get up, Izuku. We're going home. All for One's voice wasn't relieved, he was annoyed. He wasn't supposed to awaken his quirk because he was supposed to get one for all. He didn't want him to have that quirk, and he was gonna secretly steal it to make sure that his plan could still go through. But that's when he would feel as if the two quirks from earlier were just missing. He would try to activate them again, but nothing. And so he would then activate an energy ability and would aim it at Izuku, who was still just laying there in complete shock. He would say, I said, get up. But since you're not listening, I'll just kill you anyways. Izuku, now who's like now fully like aware of what's going on, he would look into this book. He would see that he has three abilities, three quirks in here. He has the two quirks he just stole from his father, the repulsion quirk and an exploding flame ability that can be added on to the repulsion quirk. However, he also has something else. It's weird. He would start to reach inside of this book and he would pull on it right as this beam was fired at him. He had hoped whatever this was could save him from this beam. He thought it was going to be some type of cool ability, but once he pulled it out, he saw it was a cloth. And seeing this cloth, he would freak out as the beam would slam into him, or well, this cloth, as this beam was about to decimate the entire area until the cloth would stretch and it would encircle the beam entirely before shrinking it down to nothing but the size of Izuku's palm. He would then drop it as his book would automatically reabsorb this cloth as he now had another quirk. Everyone seeing how his ability worked would start to think. He would think on it until he would chuckle. Ah, so that's how your quirk works. You can steal other people's quirks by absorbing them into your book. And the only way to steal them is by absorbing them into your book. So if you don't absorb them into your book, you're practically useless. However, it could still be useful. It could help me get or keep track of all these quirks I have. Plus, it's simple. Just force them to activate their quirk and absorb one of their attacks into your book. And now that quirk is yours. After All for One finished his deduction of Izuku's quirk, he would then look around, seeing people as he would realize that this little stunt, all of it was recorded. Everyone here had just seen, well, not Midoriya still the quirk, but they had just noticed him attacking a child. Now, this is nothing new. He's a villain. The part that he's worried about is the fact that he was being recorded. And well, he can't let a certain someone know where he is. Not quite yet. He's not planning on letting Toshinori figure out his location just yet. He would then look down at Midoriya. That's it. He would then look down at Izuku, who would now start to get up. He would get ready to try and hold off his father. He didn't want his father to attack these people. And all for one, seeing this resolve in his son would tell him that he had either two ways of getting out of this. One, he just simply comes home and hands over his quirk. Two, he tries and fight him, but his quirk will still be stolen regardless. And that's about it. There is no third option. Either you come quietly and just lose your quirk, or you die. And Izuku, who is again still kind of terrified of his father, would freeze as his father went to grab him. But that's when he would notice that Izuku wasn't as terrified as he thought, because Izuku wasn't shivering. He was smirking. As Izuku would slap his hand away, causing All for One to get pissed, but he knew not to use his quirk as Izuku still had his book out. And so he would slam a punch at Izuku, who would barely block this. All for One is still very powerful, and this would cause Izuku's book to fade as All for One, because he just blocked with both of his arms and let go of his book, so his book disappeared. Now, this would give All for One an idea, as Izuku would try to resummon it and would. All he had to do was think about summoning the book. Now, All for One getting an idea would add a superpower to his arm, causing his arm to grow in size. As he would get ready to attack Izuku, who would go to hold up his book at it. But that's when he would activate the wire cord, causing Izuku's arm to be pulled up, as he would obviously no longer be holding the book in the way of the punch, as it was about to slam into Izuku, only for a punch to slam into the side of All for One's head as he was sent flying through multiple trees. And Izuku would be held in the arms of the one and only All Might. As All Might would be standing there holding Izuku, he would be confused at why this kid was just so confident in handling his father. But before that, we do a bit of a recap. Well, not a recap, but a flashback, yeah. And during this little flashback, we would see that Izuku was alone in the base when his father and all of the League of Villains, which, well, wasn't really much by this point. It was still only Shiggy, Kurogiri, and Extra, who was still going through the trial, hence why they had all went out, because they were testing the new guy. And, well, All for One himself, none of them were in the base. They were all gone. And as they were all gone, Izuku had called the police. This is something he had never been able to do until now, because no one, well, would believe that Izuku would call the cops. Plus, if he called the cops to the base, well, obviously they would just die and they would just move base. Plus, Izuku would then have more, he would be more watched. His plan wasn't to get the police to come get him. He specifically asked for All Might. He knew about his father's past, he knew about his father's fights, and he knew a lot more about his father than he let on. However, my fault, I had to go do something. Anyways, after getting All Might on the phone, he claimed that he was someone who had information on someone only All Might knew. Well, not really only All Might, but on someone All Might knew. And this is how he directly got in contact with All Might, because the police didn't believe that a child had something that actually needed All Might, but he said he had something that directly called for All Might's attention, and he wanted to them to give All Might a name. AFO. He didn't fully say out the name, but he said the abbreviation AFO. And when they hung up, they called back almost immediately. But instead of the cops, this was just All Might. He would ask Midori. He would ask Izuku, "How does he know that name?" And All Might was enraged, thinking that this was some type of prank call. Until Izuku would reveal that he was the son of All For One, and he didn't like his father. And he genuinely wants to help All Might get rid of his father. And All Might obviously didn't want to trust this since, well, you know. But Izuku would only ask that nobody knew that he was All For One's son because he does not like his father. He doesn't want to be associated with his father at all. And All Might would say, "How can I trust you?" And Izuku would tell him that he'll take a lie detector test or whatever he wants after this, or they can meet up somewhere soon because he's planning on getting his father arrested today. And he wants All Might to meet him. But this is when we return to current time as we see the now enraged All For One who would look at All Might, who is holding his son, his golden ticket, and he would look at Izuku as if expecting him to use his quirk to steal one for all from All Might. But seeing Izuku not do anything was pissing him off. He would yell at his son to attack the hero. But Izuku would tell him that he has never called him his son before, so he doesn't need to start doing it now. Now, the people who were once recording were no longer there because, well, the heroes are fighting, and other heroes who were brought with All Might plus the police have cleared the area. And the other heroes who were there were not in the direct vicinity because, well, All Might told them he doesn't want them in the way because of how powerful All For One is. Now, they may not know who this guy is, but obviously, seeing someone like All Might say that someone is very powerful, they didn't want to get in his way because he wanted to go full out while fighting this man. Now, All For One would yell at Izuku saying that he'll never amount to anything and he can only be a villain with a quirk like that. But that's when All Might would step in, as he would say that Izuku had the heart of a hero, and he would look down at Izuku before putting him down, saying that he can be a hero as well, no matter what his quirk might be or how villainous it may seem. He can definitely be a hero, and all that requires is to have the resolve to be a hero. And All For One realizing that he couldn't force his ways onto Izuku, seeing how happy Izuku seemed to, well, hear that he could be a hero, this would piss him off as he would rush at Izuku only for All Might to jump in the way and the two titans would begin a huge brawl. But this would lead to the both of them, well, All For One getting knocked away because every now and again Izuku would jump in the way, taking away one of his quirks. Now he wasn't like just keeping up with them, obviously not. But every time a certain quirk was used that had a long ranged ability to it, and he had seen it. Now he had figured out the activation. Well, not the activation, but he had figured out what was necessary for him to copy or, well, steal a quirk. And it boils down to three main things. He has to see the quirk in action. He has to let the quirk touch his book or a piece of the quirk. So if it's an earth ability and someone makes earth spikes, he has to touch a piece of the earth spike or like break off a piece and put it into his book for him to completely steal the quirk. And the third and final only way for him to steal a quirk is for the person who had just used the quirk to not be using that quirk at that second anymore. So if they are still like currently using that quirk, he cannot just steal it. He has to wait until after they are done using the quirk. Now, you might be saying, how is that possible? Because what if they have a quirk like Bakugo's, where it's just an explosion that'll leave behind only dust? That dust is still technically comes from that quirk. Or Todoroki's ice, where if he shatters the ice, it only leaves behind a cold mist. That cold mist comes from his ice. It basically, whatever remains of said quirk, he can steal it based on whatever is remaining of the quirk. However, he cannot like give back quirks once he steals them. Well, I mean, it's not like he was gonna try, but well, he did kinda. He tried to return the quirk that he stole from his father, or just one of them, the exploding flames. However, it didn't work, obviously, because he can only steal quirks. But he had to make sure. And so, the remaining quirks that he stole from his father that day before his father fled was. Hold on one second. I almost forgot him. Okay. Like I was saying, he has energy sensory, which he stole from his father because, well, it was completely accidental. Okay, let me explain how it happened. He tried to help in the battle against his father and All Might, like I said earlier. And as the two Titans fought again, every now and again, he tried to pitch in to help All Might. But obviously, he was a weaker Link, but he was he was able to copy a few things because of it. He used his repulsion ability, but his father activating his sensory ability, which is I'm finna explain how he's able to copy quirks like this in a second. It's gonna make a lot of sense, but yeah, when his father activated the sensory quirk, he was able to dodge it. Hence, hence how Midoriya figured out the first, well, not the first two, but it's how Izuku was able to learn about it. His father is able to sense psychic abilities of some nature. Now, the harder part of this was getting his father to touch his book again. Well, it wasn't as hard as he thought it was because his father tried to steal said quirk. Well, steal his quirk or his book via the steal his quirk via the book because All for One can take people's quirks by grabbing them or their objects. Anyways, he tried to steal his quirk, but Izuku activated his quirk at the same time, causing him to steal the energy sensory quirk. And All for One losing this quirk wouldn't notice him about to be punched by All Might. Now, All Might does not have any type of energy manipulation abilities or anything like that, but he was just disoriented and confused. Now, back to what I was saying about the sensory or abilities like that. So, if you have any eye abilities like Aizawa's or any sensory abilities, some like that, if it's an ability that can't physically be touched by the book, or like Aizawa's eyes, he can't like force his face into the book. Well, he can technically, but when it's a quirk like that, you only have to fulfill the first two options. I mean, not options; they're mandatory. You only have to fulfill those and not the third one. So when it's a ocular ability, you only need the person to have activated their quirk and not be using it, and for them to have touched your book or well touched you in a sense of way because they're not going to always be able to touch his book, and I realized how stupid that is. But then again, I like having that nerf around him, having him only being able to. By the way, this isn't first, like, if you can't tell, this is very unprofessional. This is not the first episode. This is just me rambling about the ideas. I mean, don't get me wrong. Most of this is what's in the first episode. I'm just going about it unprofessionally because I'm just trying to get it out there. Now, like I said, if whichever one y'all choose, obviously I'm gonna re-record this. If y'all choose this one, if y'all choose the Asta story one, then I'm gonna re-record that first part. But yeah, I'm not. Yeah, this isn't the actual thing. Like this one, this isn't the script. This is just pieces of the script. I'm just saying out. This is not the full scripted thing that I'm reading off to you. However, this is the order it goes in, so don't worry. Now, like I was saying, he is able to still ocular abilities and whatnot like that. So psychic abilities that cannot be touched by seeing it be used and his book touching the person. Hence how he stole it. Now he stole sensory, psychic. I almost said psychic sense. What was it? Oh, I forgot. My fault. As you can tell, this is very unprofessional, which I kind of miss doing. I miss making these unprofessional ass videos, but yeah, that's coming to an end soon when I start recording off my scripted videos because I have a lot of them. When you're bored or when I'm bored, I just type a lot. So yeah, I have a lot of videos that yeah. Yeah, so don't worry. I'm gonna make sure before I even drop this video that I put to y'all that these are not professional. I mean, I have scripts for them, and I did not. Yeah, it's just not professional. My fault. Anyways, continuing past that whole part because I'm not gonna go back over that again. After All for One, All for One retreats, Shigaraki is notified of what happened and how Izuku switched to the hero side. He betrayed his father, almost got his father captured, and got his father injured. Now, Shigaraki, who hadn't liked Izuku from the day they had met, because, well, Izuku was the biological son of the guy he idolized, and yet was a brat in his eyes. He didn't like him, but now he hates him. And from this day on, Shigaraki was given better privileges and whatnot. I mean, at first he had great privileges and whatnot, but now he's a bit more watched over by All for One. However, he's still, I mean, as free as ever because All for One knows that his manipulation over Shigaraki or Tomura, well, I mean, his name is Tomura Shigaraki. Well, it's Tenko, but yeah, he knows that his manipulation over him will not fail. And so back on Izuku's side, after the fight, he was taken to a hospital to get checked on. And after they made sure that he was fine, he was then taken to a police station. And in this police station, he had was getting talked to by I forgot the police officer's name. I'm sorry. The police officer would use his lie detector quirk on Izuku, and Aizawa would activate his quirk because he was called to help out on Izuku, and they would find out that he wasn't lying at all. He was telling the truth. He even gave them where the old base was because all for one had fled from there. But they had found recent whatnot of people being there and all types of stuff. They went to Izuku's room, his old room. They found his bed and whatnot. He had a prison like bed and all types of junk. It was just horrible. And by the end of everything, they had started trusting Izuku. And from the age of 9, he was getting trained by Aizawa and All Might, but mostly All Might. All Might was training Izuku physically to get used to his quirk. Well, obviously not to get just used to his quirk, but used to the fact that his quirk can steal. And since he can steal quirks from people, he might steal a quirk that'll be too strong for his current body. And so All Might trained him. He would also tell him to not steal anyone's quirk while in school or while in the public eye of people, because then they would think that he's a villain or some type of danger to society. Now, only two other people know about this fact, and this would be Aizawa and Nezu. Nezu, Aizawa, and All Might. All three of them know about Midoriya's quirk. All for One knows about it to a certain degree. All he knows is that Izuku can steal quirks as long as you touch his book. And he would have told Tenko, or well, Shigaraki, that when he faces Izuku to not touch his book. At first, Shigaraki was confused until he saw the battle or the early on battle between Izuku and All for One. And while all of these videos were getting deleted, he was able to get a copy of it, and he saw that Izuku stole his master's quirk, the repulsion quirk. It was stolen. The repulsion quirk, the exploding flame quirk, the sensory ability quirk, and another quirk. He wasn't quite sure of what it was, but All for One would tell him that it was an energy beam quirk. It basically only allowed for you to condense a bit of energy into a beam and then fire it off. He didn't use it much because it didn't seem very versatile. However, we all know that that's not going to be the case with Izuku. However, Izuku was labeled as this enigma. He was officially registered under Aizawa's care as Aizawa's adopted son because All Might couldn't adopt him because, well, he just didn't want to. I mean, well, it's not that he didn't want to, but yeah, plus Aizawa and Midnight were together in this one. I was gonna do Aizawa and Miss Joke, but not the same district. And even though it didn't have to be in the same district, I just didn't wanna. So yeah, and I was gonna do Mirko honestly, but I feel like Aizawa and Midnight fits better for this character. So yeah. So Izuku had been getting trained physically from All Might. Well, I mean, physically from both of them, but more so from Aizawa, he was teaching Izuku how to get better at using these quirks he has. While Midnight, on the other hand, was teaching Izuku how to let go. He was always so tense, so calculative, and so smart. He always planned everything, and that's not good for a child, she would tell him. She would tell him that he shouldn't always have everything planned out. And sometimes he needs to just just do things without a plan. And at first, Izuku can get used to this, but he told her that he'll try. However, under Aizawa's help, he was able to get good at using his quirks. Starting off with the repulsion quirk, he realized that not only could it be used to push things away, but he could use it like how his father did. It had not lost power. It was the same strength as when he stole it from his father. He is able to destroy buildings with this quirk. However, he is also able to repel attacks by pushing them away, hence why it's called repulsion. And he could just crush things if he wanted to. However, this quirk, while useful, was somewhat too dangerous. The exploding flame one, on the other hand, was different. He figured out ways to use it differently. You see, he could add these flames onto items so he could pick up a rock and throw it, and it would catch flames, and when it made contact with someone or something, they would explode. Not like the person, but like the rocks would explode into flames. But if he just made a fireball and threw it, the fireball would just explode into, well, flames. And that wasn't very useful because, well, they could just dodge it and they could just get away from the flames. Plus, it's not like the flames did a lot and they don't just immediately like fully catch the person ablaze. It's just flames. So he wanted to enhance how hard this hit when it did hit. And he could cover damn near anything with it because, well, again, he stole this from All For One, who is very powerful. So he could cover a whole building in flames with someone inside of it exploded, which wouldn't kill them because, well, it wouldn't. It's just the force of the building exploding would cause the rubble to crumble on them. And using his repulsion quirk, he could put out those flames while keeping the villain trapped or whoever trapped under it. Or he could, it just exploded using the repulsion quirk to push away the rubble and slam his opponent into a wall because the explosion by itself would already cause them to, well, be injured because they were inside of a building that exploded, but the repulsion slamming them into a wall could potentially knock them unconscious. Luckily, not killing them, but yeah. Now, onto the final quirk, the beam quirk. For this one, Aizawa would have just told Midoriya that he would be training under someone if he made it into UA. Now, Izuku would be confused on why he said if, but Aizawa would tell him realistically that he doesn't want Izuku to show all of his quirks in school. He wants him to show at least just one. Just get a quirk or choose a quirk that you have to just always use. But Izuku would then say, what if he just plays off his quirk as if it were a copy quirk? And Aizawa would be confused as Izuku would then answer saying that he would lie and say that his quirk is a copy quirk. Whenever he touches an opponent with his book, he copies the quirk into said book. And then, well, after copying an opponent's quirk into his book, he is then able to use their quirk. Now, hearing this, Aizawa would actually be impressed at how fast Izuku came up with things, but he would then tell Izuku to be careful about giving away his weakness about the touching the book part. And Izuku would say, sure, I'll just say something else. And he would tell him that he shouldn't reveal anything about it. He should just tell them that he's able to copy quirks and that they are stored into his book. Now, Izuku would like this idea. He would even tell Aizawa that that's likely what he's going to do, but he needs to train hard. His phone would then ring as he would get a notification from All Might and he would run off. Now, by this point, a year had passed and Izuku was now 10. He was going to go train with All Might, and Aizawa was about to put Izuku into school. Now, he didn't want to do so immediately before because, well, I mean, All For One is still looking for him. And by the way, he doesn't have the tracker quirk in Izuku anymore because his quirk awakening caused it to be destroyed. Yes, not removed, but the quirk itself was just destroyed. Now, this is when Izuku, on his way to meet All Might, would see that there was a hero who just captured 3 villains. And up to this point, Izuku had only seen the good side of heroes. But he would then notice that after the hero had saved the day or stopped the bank robbery, he went to the villains and drove off with them in the police car, telling the officers that he would take them in himself. Now, the officers wouldn't question this until the car would explode into flames and Izuku would rush over, but would be stopped by the police officers. But while he was being stopped, he would sense something. his psychic sensory quirk had activated, and he would look over into an alleyway before rushing off in that direction. Now, the people didn't really pay attention to him, the officers not really either, but Izuku would have ran after whatever he was sensing until he came to a clearing and he saw the hero was freeing the three villains. This is when, for the first time, Izuku had seen the dark side of heroes. I mean, it wasn't the worst side of heroes, but this opened his eyes to the fact that heroes weren't always just the good guys. They could always also be the bad guys. He would then understand at that moment that the term villain was just a label and nothing more. There are no heroes or villains, really. There's just people who put on the persona of a good guy and those who choose to be the bad guy. And then there's those who choose to put on a persona of the good guy, but are really the bad guy. They are so unlike All Might. All Might is a true hero. Aizawa is a true hero. Midnight is a true hero. Meaning that guy isn't, because he's nothing like them. He's scum. Izuku would, at that moment, pull out his book. Him summoning this book would attract the villains. I was trying to think of a word, but I couldn't. So, yeah. This would attract the attention. Why couldn't I think of this fucking word? This would attract the attention of the villains who would look at Izuku. And as they looked at him, they would notice the book in his hand. They would ask if he was a lost child, but Izuku would tell them to shut up. He would say that he's gonna take them in. And they would burst out laughing. And the hero would step up as he would tell Izuku to just go home. But the three villains would rush at Izuku, causing the hero to snicker. As he would say, well, it seems my colleagues won't let you go home. So you'll die here, kid. You know too much. But Izuku would pull on his book as this cloth would come out. As he'd say, I was gonna say the same thing. He would see all of the villains activating their quirks. And as they attacked him with them, Izuku would smirk as he would wrap them up in his cloth, his fun cloth. And after doing so, he would shrink them and would throw their whole bodies and the cloth into the book and would close it. The villain, or well, villainous hero would be in shock. He would ask what he did with them, but that's when Izuku would open the book again. He would then pull out the cloth and would swing the villains back at the guy as they would regrow to their full size. But the hero would just sidestep them as they would all slam into a tree and their bodies felt weird. They were weakened and they could barely stand. As Izuku would then look at the man, as he'd say, how dare you work with scum like them? You know nothing of what they've done in the past. And you call yourself a hero? Yeah, I'm stripping you of that title right here and now. If anything, you're a villainous hero. And saying the word hero is just pissing me off. You aren't one. You're just a villain. Now, The man would smirk as he'd say, "Is that so, kid? Then fine, I'll be your villain. You'll be the hero. Let's play." The man would stand in a stance, and he would then hear the guys behind him groan as he would stop before looking back at them. All three of the villains would look at their hands, which were twitching, and they were barely able to stand as well. Their quirks were just ripped out of their bodies, but they don't know that. And the hero would just think that it was a side effect of them being shrunken down and then, well, placed in the book before being spit back out. But Izuku would just look in his book. He would see the new quirks he has. He has the wind quirk that one guy had. He had the ability to slash through things by swiping his arms with wind. But it wasn't very strong because, well, the guy himself wasn't very strong. Izuku had found out by this point that if a quirk he steals is stronger than him, it stays the strength that it was until he becomes stronger than the quirk, then the quirk starts to grow again. However, if he's stronger than the quirk that he has stolen, the quirk improves itself to grow to fit him, well, his current body, and the quirk grows with him. Now, he now has this wind slashing quirk, but it's not wind manipulation. It's literally just called wind slash. Now, Izuku would sigh seeing the simplicity of it, but well, it gets the job done. Plus, it's a cool quirk. He would look at the second quirk of the faster guy that, well, was the fastest of the three villains that ran at him. He had a speed enhancement quirk that lasted for 15 seconds. However, it had a 30-second cooldown after every use. And luckily, you don't get tired while using this quirk. And so Izuku would chuckle seeing this one. It was cool and, well, worth it. But this third quirk, this one was impressive. You see, this quirk right here allowed for him to harden his hands into something resembling claws. Now he is able to use these sharpened nails, or well, yeah, his nails as if they were claws. So, claw through things, cut people's faces and whatnot. Basically, damn near anything with these claw-like fingers. And Izuku liked this one specifically. However, he would then look at the hero who was getting ready to kill the kid that he now sees as a threat as Izuku prepared to summon his cloth again. He doesn't like showing off his stolen quirks. And so he wouldn't. He would, like I said, summon his cloth. Now, the hero would activate his quirk. It's called Flame Fist. It allows for him to literally just cover his fist in flames. No, he cannot punch flames at people in the shape of a fist. The only things he can do is literally just catch his fist on fire and burn things he grabs or burn people when he punches them. But that's it. That's about it. Now, he didn't try to instantly attack Izuku because he was worried that Izuku would shrink him. And he would assume that that was Izuku's quirk. The ability to burn, almost said burn, the ability to shrink people and seal them into his book momentarily before he has to throw them back out. However, once he does so, it adds a paralyzing effect onto their body. Now, not allowing for them to, well, use their quirks or, well, anything while in that paralyzed like state because the villains still are paralyzed because their quirks were just ripped out forcefully. Now, Izuku, who was holding his fun cloth, would take a stance, as the man took a boxing stance. And the two of them would get ready, and Izuku would smirk, realizing that his plan was working, and his face was hidden by his cloth, or more so his mouth, so the man couldn't see this smirk. So he would just assume that the young Izuku, or the young child in front of him, was only able to summon the cloth via his book, and the fact that he has to constantly reach into his book to pull out said quirk means that the only way for him to activate the cloth was by grabbing it out of the book. So all he has to do is burn the cloth, make Izuku let go of the book so he cannot summon the cloth anymore, and then, well, kill him. After coming up with this plan, he would then rush Izuku. And as he did so, Izuku would swing the cloth at the guy. And he wasn't expecting the guy to like go to catch it, but then at the same time, he wasn't really expecting the guy to fall for anything he had planned. Well, his real plans. But the man catching the cloth wasn't a part of them. That was just stupid to Izuku. But then again, he had to remember that nobody knows that he can steal quirks. The man would grab the cloth, shocking Izuku, like genuinely, as the man would then start to burn it. And as the flames spread across the cloth, Izuku would let it go, jumping backwards, but the guy would throw it at Izuku's face, who would swat it away with his right hand, causing him to not be like it's nowhere near the book. And this is when the hero would rush at him with a punch at his face. And Izuku would smirk as he would twist his body as he would put the book right in front of his face as the man's arm went through the book. Now, the man at first thought that he had just scored a hit on Izuku, who was leaning backwards because, well, he just twisted his body. However, Izuku would look at him and would stand up straight as the man would realize that his hand was in the book. He would snatch his arm out, but would then fall to his knees weakly, as Izuku kneed him in the face and then punched him to the ground with his own flaming fist. This is when the man looked at Izuku in horror. Your quirk. It's not. No. No, it's not. I do not just summon a cloth. I do not just seal people. My quirk allows for me to steal quirks. And you four have to die. I can't let you reveal this secret of mine, you know? Now, the three would be confused and would start to freak out. Now, this is when we go into the second quirk. I mean, not the second, the third quirk that Izuku had stolen from All For One. This quirk allows for him to erase up to 5 minutes out of anyone's memories. However, he can only do it once per person. And Izuku would punch every one of them until they were knocked unconscious. After that, he would activate this quirk and would erase any memory of him. Well, not of him because he had arrived before 5 minutes, but the fighting part only lasted about 5 minutes. So even if they did remember Izuku, all they would remember is the cloth. They wouldn't remember the fact that he just activated the flame ability, or the fact that their memories were erased. Now, this is when Izuku would call All Might, and All Might would arrive at the scene. He would be followed, obviously, by people, and Izuku had gotten out of the way because, well, he didn't want to be seen. Now, All Might would arrive, and then the camera crews and whatnot, because, well, they were still there doing interviews about the bank robbery. And when they arrived, seeing All Might over the defeated hero and villains, All Might would reveal that the hero had helped the villains escape and that they were all sharing money and whatnot because Izuku had went through their phones and whatnot. Izuku is great at a lot of things. Again, in the he was with villains most of his life. He knows how to hack into phones. Plus, the guy had he had face ID, and the other guys just had fingerprints. And while he did take a bit of the money, they had thousands upon thousands of dollars. He took a bit of money. Not that they stole from the bank, obviously. That was given back to the bank by the fake hero. He still gave back the money, don't get me wrong, but he took a few thousands from them. The three villains, they coughed up 25,000 in total, but the hero, he's a hero, coughed up around 100,000. Now you might be saying, why does Izuku need all of this? Well, he doesn't. You see, he was going to give this money to the less fortunate, and that's exactly what he did. On his way back home, he gave this money to charity. He did it under All Might's name because, well, All Might is known, and, well, nobody would really question why a kid came to give money under All Might's name. So when All Might was getting interviewed about the orphanage that he had just donated 100,000 and $115,000 to, he was confused until he saw a note, or not a note, a message in his phone from Izuku saying that he had did something and did him a favor, and he wanted to thank All Might, so he did it for him. All Might would say that it was no problem and that it wasn't anything serious. Plus, he had his nephew do it for him. Now, Izuku would arrive back home and he would see Aizawa sleeping and Midnight preparing food. Now, I'm gonna leave this part off here because, well, this isn't the real part 1, but like this is basically everything I'm gonna go over in it when I actually like re-record this properly. But like I said, I'm only trying to speed through this, and yeah, somehow this is still an hour, and so I could have just really recorded the actual video, and it would have been around the same amount, if not a bit longer. But yeah, I just wanted to record this so you guys could at least see what it was gonna be about and whatnot, and then y'all could just pick y'all choice from that. I'm gonna let everyone know, well, all of y'all know this before I even post these. So yeah. Anyways, with that being said, I'm gonna leave that off here.